Connecticut, Christmas Eve. The snow is burying the driveway, erasing the only exit from the estate. My name is Jessica Jones, and I am clutching a fortune wrapped in a dirty mechanic's rag. Inside, the fire roars, yet the house remains freezing. My sister wears a necklace of green glass she believes is a crown preening for a legacy built on lies. My family offered me a choice tonight, the glitter or the garbage. They thought I was weak enough to accept the insult. They didn't realize that sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in the dust, waiting for someone brave enough to claim them. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. The snow came down in hard straight lines, driving against the windshield of the Ford. It was an old car, a 2011 sedan, with a heater that rattled when the fan speed went above medium, but the engine was sound. I had paid for it myself, cash 3 years ago. The wipers slapped a steady rhythmic beat against the glass, clearing the gray slush that kicked up from the interstate. It was Christmas Eve in Connecticut, and the light was already failing at 4 in the afternoon. The sky was the color of a bruised plum, heavy and low. I turned off the main road and onto the private drive that led to my parents' estate. The gravel had been plowed and salted black grit against the pristine white banks on either side. I parked at the end of the driveway away from the garage. The space near the house was full. There was my father's Range Rover, black and shining even in the storm. Beside it was my mother's Mercedes, and a new white Porsche Macan that I assumed belonged to Bella or perhaps Richard, though I didn't see his car. My Ford looked like a mistake, parked next to them, a piece of machinery designed for utility rather than statement. I cut the engine. The silence rushed in, filling the car. I sat for a moment listening to the ticking of the cooling metal and the soft hiss of snow on the roof. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. The archive work had been heavy this month, cataloging a collection of Civil War letters that smelled of vinegar and decay. My eyes were clear, though. I didn't look like them. I never had. I got out. The cold was immediate, a sharp physical weight that pressed against my coat. I walked to the front door, my boots crunching on the salted stone. The house loomed above me, a colonial revival monster with white pillars and black shutters. Every window was glowing with a warm electric light that promised comfort, but rarely delivered it. There was a wreath on the door, massive, and constructed of holly and pine woven with gold ribbon. It was perfect. It was also artificial. I knew because I had touched it last year. It was professional, installed by a service that came in November and left with a check. The door opened before I could knock. It was Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper. She looked relieved to see someone who wasn't demanding a drink refill. "Miss Jessica," she said, "you made good time." "The roads were clear until the exit," I said. I handed her my coat. Underneath, I wore a simple gray dress, wool functional. It wasn't festive. "Are they in the sitting room?" "Yes. Your grandmother is here as well." I nodded and walked down the hallway. The floors were marble heated from beneath. The house smelled of nothing, not of cooking, not of pine, not of wood smoke. It smelled of cleaning agents and expensive odorless air. I passed the formal living room where the Christmas tree stood. It was 12 feet tall, a blue spruce decorated entirely in silver and white glass spheres. There were no handmade ornaments, no macaroni stars from kindergarten, no mismatched bulbs from trips to Europe. It was a display piece, cold and beautiful and dead. I entered the sitting room. The fire was roaring behind the grate, gas-fed and controlled by a remote. My father Robert stood by the mantel, swirling a glass of scotch. He wore a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my rent. My mother Susan was seated on the white sofa, flipping through a magazine. She looked up as I entered, her gaze sweeping over me, cataloging faults. "You're late," she said. She didn't stand up. "The traffic was bad near the bridge," I said. "Merry Christmas, Mother." "You look pale," she said. "And that dress. It's a funeral dress, Jessica. Couldn't you have found something red?" "I like gray," I said. "Jessica doesn't do color," Bella said. She emerged from the sunroom holding a flute of champagne. My younger sister was 24 and vibrated with a frantic, nervous energy. She was wearing a green silk gown that was too formal for a family dinner cut low in the front. On her left hand, a diamond the size of a grape caught the light. She flashed it as she walked, a reflex she had developed since the engagement. Richard sends his love. He's stuck in Aspen with his parents. A blizzard grounded the jets. A tragedy, I said. Be nice, my father said. He didn't look at me. He looked at his glass. Get yourself a drink, Jessica. We're waiting on dinner. I walked to the sideboard. I poured a club soda. I didn't need the alcohol to numb the edge. I preferred to keep the edge sharp. I turned to the corner of the room, to the high-backed leather wing chair that faced the fire. Grandma Elaine was there. She was 82, a small woman who seemed to have shrunk in physical size while expanding in presence. She wore a black suit, severe and elegant, and her white hair was pulled back in a tight knot. Her hands, spotted with age and roped with blue veins, held a crystal tumbler of neat scotch. She wasn't looking at the fire. She was watching me. Hello, Grandma, I said. You're the only one who knows how to walk in a room, she said. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping together. Your sister stomps like a pony. Your mother glides like she's on wheels. You walk. Is that a compliment? It's an observation, she said. She took a sip of her drink. Her eyes were bright, intelligent, and entirely devoid of the warmth people usually associate with grandmothers. She didn't bake cookies. She read financial reports and history books. She had survived the Depression, a war, and 40 years of marriage to a man she tolerated but did not respect. Sit down, Jessica. You make me nervous hovering. I sat on the ottoman near her. The heat from the fire was intense here. I could feel the tension in the room, a wire pulled tight between the four of us. Bella was talking loudly to Mother about the wedding venue, about the flowers, about the need to import peonies from Holland. Mother was nodding, calculating costs and social impacts. Father was drinking. Dinner is served, Mrs. Gable announced from the doorway. We moved to the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the Lenox with the gold rim. The silverware was heavy sterling, polished to a mirror shine. We took our assigned places. Father at the head, Mother at the foot. Bella on one side facing the window. Grandma and I on the other facing the wall. The first course was a lobster bisque. It was rich and smooth. We ate in a silence that was punctuated only by the clinking of spoons against porcelain. How is the library? Father asked eventually. It was his annual question. He didn't care, but he felt the obligation of the host. It's an archive, I said. And it's fine. We acquired a new collection of estate papers from the 1920s. Dust and dead people's tax returns, Bella said, tearing a piece of bread. I don't know how you do it. I'd go insane. It's so stagnant. It's history, I said. It's the truth of how people lived. It's a minimum wage existence, Mother said, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. But if it makes you happy, Jessica, that's what matters. We can't all be ambitious. I didn't respond. I focused on the soup. I had learned a long time ago that defending myself only gave them more ammunition. To them, value was determined by the market. If you couldn't sell it, it wasn't worth doing. My life by their metric was a bad investment. The main course was roast beef, bloody and tender. The wine was poured, a heavy Cabernet that stained the glass. As the plates were cleared, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew thinner. Mother sat up straighter, smoothing the tablecloth with her manicured fingers. She exchanged a look with Father, then with Bella. A script was being initiated. We have some news, Mother said. She looked at Grandma Elaine, then at us. As you know, your grandmother has been having some difficulty with the stairs at her townhouse. I have no difficulty, Grandma said. I just don't like them. Regardless, Mother continued, her voice hardening slightly, we've decided it's best for her to move into the Meadows. It's a wonderful community, assisted living, full staff. She moves in January. I looked at Grandma. She was calm, cutting a piece of beef with surgical precision. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a general who had chosen her battlefield. Because of the move, Father said, taking over, Mother Elaine wants to downsize. She wants to settle her estate now, rather than later, specifically the jewelry. Bella stopped eating. Her fork hovered halfway to her mouth. Her eyes went wide and a hunger sharpened her soft features. The jewelry. We all knew what that meant, the family legends. "Tonight?" Bella asked. "We're doing this tonight." "It's Christmas," Grandma Elaine said. She set her knife and fork down. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "The season of giving. And I want to see where my things go while I still have the eyes to see it. I don't trust lawyers, and I certainly don't trust your mother to do it after I'm dead." Susan stiffened but said nothing. "So," Grandma said. She reached down to the floor beside her chair. She lifted two objects and placed them on the white tablecloth. The first was a long, flat case covered in blue velvet. It was pristine. The second was a wooden box, roughly the size of a shoebox, scarred and scratched, the varnish peeling in strips. It smelled of cedar and old earth. "The emerald necklace," Grandma said, tapping the velvet case. "And the attic box," she said, tapping the wood. She looked at Bella. Then she turned her gaze to me. The blue eyes were cold and hard as flint. "We settle it now," she said. The two objects sat on the white linen like a wager. The blue velvet case was long and sleek, the kind of object that absorbed the light in the room and held it. It looked expensive. It looked like a promise. Beside it, the wooden box sat squat and ugly. The wood was dark, stained by years of handling and neglect, and the brass latch was dull with oxidation. A long scratch ran diagonally across the lid, exposing the raw, pale grain underneath. It looked like something you would find at a yard sale for $1, buried under a pile of damp paperbacks. My mother, Susan, cleared her throat. It was a delicate sound, but in the silence of the dining room it was a gavel coming down. She reached out and adjusted the stem of her wine glass, turning it exactly 3 degrees to the right. "Well," she said, "this is certainly dramatic, Mother Elaine. But perhaps we should discuss the logistics before we start handing things out like party favors." "There are no logistics," Grandma said. She didn't look at Susan. She kept her hands folded on the table. "There are 2 granddaughters. There are 2 inheritances. I am simplifying the probate process." "But the value," my father said. He leaned forward, the Scotch finally loosening his tongue enough to speak his mind. "We have to consider the equity. The emerald necklace has been appraised. We know what it is. That box? Well, it's a sentimental item, certainly, but we can't pretend they are equal shares." "They are not equal," Grandma agreed. "That is the point." Bella was staring at the velvet case. Her breathing had changed. It was shallow, rapid. She looked like a cat watching a bird flutter against a window pane. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling slightly, but stopped short of touching it. "It's the Romanov emerald," Bella whispered. She said the name with reverence, as if she were praying. "You wore it to your 50th anniversary. I remember the pictures." "It's a heavy piece," Grandma said. "It requires a certain posture to carry." "I can carry it," Bella said quickly. She looked at Mother. "Richard's mother is hosting the Winter Gala at the Met next month. The theme is Gilded Age. If I showed up wearing that, it would solidify everything. It would show them that I bring something to the marriage besides just a name." Mother nodded. She was calculating. I could see the spreadsheet opening behind her eyes. "Bella is right," Mother said. "She is entering a very public phase of her life, Jessica. She will be photographed. She will be scrutinized. The necklace isn't just jewelry, it's armor. It establishes her standing." "And Jessica?" Grandma asked. "Does Jessica not need armor?" The table went quiet again. The heat of the room seemed to rise. I felt the sweat prickling under the heavy wool of my dress. I kept my face blank, staring at the candle flame flickering in the center of the table. I knew what was coming. I had known it since I parked my car next to the Porsches. Mother turned to me. Her expression was soft, pitying. It was the face she wore when she had to fire a maid or explain to a neighbor why their invitation had been lost in the mail. "Jessica," she began, her voice reasonable, logical. "You know we love you. You know we are proud of your..." independence. But we have to be realistic about lifestyles. Go on, I said. Be realistic. You live in a walk-up in New Haven, she said. You take the train, you work in a basement with old paper. Your life is private, quiet, small, my father added. It's a small life, Jess. There's no shame in that. But be honest with yourself. Where would you wear a 20-carat emerald to the grocery store, to the laundromat? You don't go to galas, Jessica, Mother said, driving the point home. You don't mix with that set. You made that choice when you turned down the internship at Morgan Stanley. You chose to step away. If we gave you the necklace, it would just sit in a safety deposit box. It would be a waste. A hidden asset is a dead asset. And the insurance, Father said, seizing on the practical. The premiums alone would be a burden for you. You'd have to sell it just to afford to keep it. And selling family heirlooms? Well, we don't do that. I looked at them. They were so reasonable. They had constructed a fortress of logic where my exclusion was not an act of cruelty, but an act of mercy. They were saving me from the burden of wealth. So, I said, Bella gets the emerald because she can use it, and I get the box because you like old things, Bella said. She tore her eyes away from the velvet case to look at me. There was no malice in her face, only a total lack of awareness. Remember, you used to spend hours in the attic playing with Grandma's junk. You like the dust. It suits you. It matches her eyes, Mother said, smiling at her own wit. The dust matches her eyes. Oh, that's terrible of me. I'm kidding, Jessica. I didn't smile. I looked at Grandma Elaine. She hadn't moved. She was watching me, waiting to see if I would flip the table, scream, or cry. She was testing the spine of the animal she had raised. The logic seems sound, Grandma said dryly. Susan, you make a compelling case for market utility. It's just common sense, Susan said. Fine, Grandma said. Then let us conclude the business. Bella, the choice is technically yours as the bride-to-be. Tradition dictates the bride chooses first. It was a lie. There was no such tradition. Grandma was making up the rules as she went, pushing the pawns where she wanted them. Bella didn't wait for permission. I want the necklace, she said. I mean, obviously. I promise I'll take care of it, Grandma. I'll wear it for the wedding photos. I'll make sure everyone knows it's the Foster emerald. Very well, Grandma said. Take it. Bella reached out and grabbed the blue velvet case. She pulled it toward her, as if she were afraid it might vanish. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp. The lid snapped open. Inside, resting on white satin, lay the necklace. It was a monster. A central emerald square cut, and the size of a postage stamp, surrounded by a halo of diamonds suspended on a thick gold chain. It glittered violently in the candlelight. It was green, deep and verdant, the color of envy and money. Oh my God, Bella exhaled. She lifted it out. The gold clinked against her nails. She held it up to her neck. Mother, look, look. Stunning, Mother said. Absolutely stunning. It brings out the gold in your hair. It's heavy, Bella laughed. It feels so rich. They were lost in the glare of the stone. They had forgotten I was there. They had forgotten Grandma was there. They were worshipping at the altar of the thing. And you, Jessica, Grandma said. Her voice cut through their cooing. You are left with the leavings. I looked at the wooden box. I remembered it. I hadn't thought about it in 20 years, but seeing it now, the memory washed over me with the smell of rain and dry timber. I was 8 years old. The house was full of people I didn't know, business partners, politicians, and I had fled up the narrow stairs to the attic. It was a forbidden zone filled with trunks and covered furniture. I had found this box tucked behind a dress form. I had opened it and found a world of costume jewelry, glass beads, plastic pearls, clip-on earrings that pinched my lobes. I had spent hours adorning myself, pretending to be a queen of a silent, dusty kingdom. It was the only place in the house where I didn't feel like I was being measured and found wanting. I reached out and touched the wood. It was rough. It felt real. I'll take the box, I said. You don't have to act grateful, Father said, pouring himself another scotch. We know it's not the same. I'll write you a check, Jess, to balance things out a bit. 5,000. Does that help? I don't want a check, I said. I want the box. Suit yourself, he grunted. Open it, Bella said, distracted, still admiring her reflection in the back of a spoon. Let's see what trash is in there. Maybe there's some vintage Chanel costume stuff. That's trendy right now. I pulled the box toward me. It was heavier than I remembered. Solid oak, maybe mahogany under the grime. I undid the latch. It resisted stiff with age, then gave way with a sharp clack. I lifted the lid. The smell hit me first, a wave of stale perfume, cedar, and oxidation. The box was filled to the brim with a tangle of chains and beads. There were strands of fake pearls with the coating peeling off. There were chunky plastic bangles from the 60s. There was a brooch shaped like a poodle with missing rhinestone eyes. It was a jumble of discarded vanity. Oh dear, Mother said, wrinkling her nose. That smells musty. You might want to leave that in the garage, Jessica. We don't want spores in the house. It's fine, I said. I ran my hand through the pile. The metal was cold. It felt like chaos. It felt like a life lived without curation, messy and vibrant. Well, that's settled then, Father said. He looked relieved. The transaction was complete. The good child got the gold, the bad child got the garbage, and he had bought his way out of the guilt with a mental note to write a check later. A toast to Bella's upcoming nuptials and to Mother Elaine's generosity. They raised their glasses. Bella held her champagne with her left hand, ensuring the diamond engagement ring and the emerald necklace were in the same visual frame. To legacy, Mother said. To knowing your worth, Grandma said. She raised her glass, but she was looking at me. She wasn't drinking to them. I didn't raise my glass. I looked down at the box. My fingers brushed against the bottom. The wood floor of the box felt uneven. There was a lip on the side, a tiny, almost invisible ridge where the joinery didn't quite line up. I pressed on it. It didn't move. I pressed harder. It felt solid, but the sound it made when the beads shifted was wrong. It sounded hollow. Jessica, don't pout, Bella said. You can borrow the emerald, someday, if you ever have a date. I'm not pouting, I said. I'm just looking. Well, look later, Mother said. Mrs. Gable is bringing dessert. It's a hazelnut torte. Let's try to have a pleasant end to the evening. Put the junk away. I closed the lid of the box. The darkness swallowed the tangled mess inside. I pulled it onto my lap off the table. It sat heavy on my thighs, a dead weight of wood and glass. But as I settled it, I felt something shift inside, a thud that was too dense for plastic beads. It was a heavy metallic slide distinct from the rattle of the costume jewelry. I looked up. Grandma was sipping her scotch. She gave me the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a smile. It was a command. Wait. The room felt cold again despite the fire, but the box on my lap felt warm, as if it were generating its own heat. I sat there, the good sister, preening with her green glass, the parents satisfied with their social engineering, and I held the dirty, scratched box with both hands, feeling the secret weight of it anchoring me to the chair. I didn't know what was in there yet, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to leave it in the garage. We moved back to the sitting room for coffee and brandy. The ritual of the evening demanded it. The fire had burned down to a bed of glowing coals, radiating a fierce, steady heat that dried the air and made the skin on my face feel tight. My father poured a generous measure of cognac into a snifter and stood by the window looking out at the snow that was burying his property. He looked satisfied, a man who had successfully navigated a treacherous social obligation and come out with his wallet and his ego intact. Bella was posing in front of the gilt-framed mirror above the mantel. She turned her head left, then right, watching the green stone at her throat catch the firelight. It threw aggressive, fractured beams of light across the ceiling. It's heavy, she said again, touching the stone. You can feel the history in it. Richard is going to die when he sees this. It's a statement piece, Mother said from the sofa. She was flipping through a copy of Vogue, but her eyes were on Bella. It says you come from substance. That's what the Fosters are. Substance. I sat in the wing chair again, the wooden box on my knees. I had not taken a brandy. I had a glass of ice water on the side table. The condensation was pooling on the coaster. The box sat there ugly and mute. I ran my thumb along the bottom edge again. I felt the ridge. It was a hairline fracture in the wood, concealed by years of grime and varnish. "Jessica, are you still holding that thing?" Mother asked, glancing over. "Put it on the floor. You're getting dust on your dress." "I'm looking for the earrings," I said. "The ones with the poodle." "God burn them." Bella laughed. She was high on the adrenaline of acquisition. "Burn the whole box. It's probably infested." I ignored them. I pressed my fingernail into the groove at the bottom of the box. It was tight. I shifted the box, tilting it toward the firelight. The bottom panel wasn't a solid piece of wood. It was an insert. I pushed against the corner, applying steady pressure. The wood groaned, a dry, protesting sound. "What are you doing?" Father asked, turning from the window. "Don't break it, Jessica. If you're going to keep it, respect it." "I am respecting it," I said. I pushed harder. There was a sharp click, like a bone snapping. The false bottom sprang up a fraction of an inch. A hidden spring, old and stiff, had released. The conversation in the room stopped. Bella looked away from the mirror. Mother lowered her magazine. I hooked my finger under the lifted panel and pried it open. It came away with a tear of old felt. Underneath the false floor, nestled in a hollowed-out compartment carved directly into the base of the box, was a bundle. It didn't look like jewelry. It looked like trash. It was a roll of fabric, maybe velvet once, but now it was black and stiff with oil and age. It was bound with a piece of rotting twine. It looked like a mechanic's rag that had been shoved into a hole to stop a draft. "What on earth is that?" Mother asked. Her voice was sharp with disgust. "I told you, mold, rot. Jessica, put that down immediately. I won't have black mold in this room." "It's not mold," I said. I lifted the bundle out. It was heavy, much heavier than the rest of the box combined. It had a density to it that commanded respect. The weight sat in my palm, cold and dense. "It's a rag," Bella said. "Grandma kept a dirty rag in a secret compartment. Maybe she was hiding money in it." "Is there cash?" "No cash," I said. I pulled the twine. It disintegrated in my fingers. I unrolled the cloth. It was stiff, crackling as it unfolded. Inside, black and shapeless, were 3 pieces of metal. They were so tarnished they looked like cast iron or lead. A necklace, a bracelet, and a pair of earrings. They were coated in a thick, greasy patina that absorbed the light. They looked industrial, ugly. "Oh, for God's sake," Father said. "It's scrap metal, probably iron settings for the glass beads. Throw it in the fire, Jessica. Wash your hands." "It's filthy," Mother said, standing up. "Elaine, really? Why would you keep garbage in a false bottom? Was this some sort of Depression-era hoarding habit?" Grandma Elaine didn't answer. She was watching me. Her eyes were bright, unblinking. She took a sip of her scotch. I looked at the black metal. The shape of the links was precise, geometric, Art Deco. Even under the grime, the construction was flawless. The links moved like water fluid and silent. Iron didn't move like that. Iron rusted and seized. This was smooth. I reached for my water glass. I dipped my linen napkin into the ice water. "Jessica, don't use the good linen for that," Mother snapped. I didn't stop. I took the wet napkin and pressed it against the center of the necklace, against the largest of the black shapes. I rubbed hard. The black grease smeared onto the white linen, staining it dark gray. I rubbed again, and again. The black coating gave way. It didn't reveal brass. It didn't reveal the dull gray of steel. It revealed a white, blinding fire. The metal underneath was white, pure, icy white. And set into the metal were stones, not glass, not paste. They were clear, colorless, and when the firelight hit them, they didn't just shine. They fractured the light into a spectrum of blue and violet. I rubbed harder, cleaning a 2-inch section. The transformation was violent. The ugly black chrysalis fell away, revealing a geometric masterpiece of platinum and diamonds. The center stone was a marquise cut, flanked by baguettes. It was blinding. The room went silent, the kind of silence that happens when a gun goes off. I picked up the bracelet. I rubbed the clasp. The tarnish wiped away to reveal the stamp. I squinted at it in the firelight. Cartier, I read aloud. Paris, number 4922. I looked up. Bella was freezing. Her hand went to her throat, clutching the green stone. Mother was standing halfway between the sofa and me, her mouth slightly open. Father had lowered his snifter. "Let me see that," Father said. His voice was different. Hoarse. "No," I said. I finished cleaning the center of the necklace. It lay on the dirty oilcloth like a star that had fallen into a coal chute. It was cold and magnificent. It made the rest of the room look cheap. "Grandma?" I asked. Grandma Elaine set her glass down on the side table with a definitive clack. She leaned forward, the shadows of the fire playing on her face. She looked like a hawk that had just seen a mouse. "My mother," Grandma said, her voice clear and strong, "lived through the crash of 29. She saw friends jump out of windows. She saw families lose everything: houses, cars, names. She learned that when the world breaks, people come for the shiny things first." She pointed a crooked finger at the velvet case on the table, the one Bella had claimed. That, she said, was the decoy. My father commissioned it in 1930. High-quality lead crystal, gold-plated setting. It was designed to sit in the safe, to look important, to be taken if the house was broken into. Bella made a small choking sound. She looked down at the massive emerald on her chest. "And this?" I asked, touching the platinum. "That is the reality," Grandma said. "My mother took her wedding set, her inheritance, the real wealth of the family. She coated it in beeswax and lamp black to hide the shine. She wrapped it in oilcloth. She built a false bottom in a box of junk jewelry. She put it in the attic." "Why?" Mother whispered. "Why leave it there?" "Because nobody looks twice at a box of junk," Grandma said. "Burglars don't steal sentimental trash. They steal the safe. They steal the velvet cases." She reached into her handbag, which sat on the floor beside her chair. She pulled out a manila envelope. She tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy slap. "The appraisals," she said. "Dated last week." Father moved. He didn't walk. He lunged. He picked up the envelope and tore it open. He pulled out the papers. He scanned them, his eyes darting back and forth. His face, usually flush with alcohol, went pale. "Read it," Grandma said. Father swallowed. He looked at Bella, then at me, then at the paper. "Item A," he read, his voice shaking. "Necklace, the Foster emerald. Materials: gold-plated base, metal green, leaded glass, white spinal accents. Condition good. Replacement value, $450. The silence stretched. The fire popped a loud crack that made Bella jump. She clawed at the clasp behind her neck. The necklace that had been her armor suddenly seemed to burn her skin. "And item B?" I asked. Father turned the page. He licked his lips. He looked at the dirty pile of metal and diamonds on my lap with a sudden terrified hunger. "Item B," he read. "Art Deco Parure. Maker Cartier, Paris, circa 1924. Materials: platinum, old European cut diamonds, total weight approximately 45 carats. Provenance verified. Condition excellent, requiring professional cleaning. Insurance replacement value." He stopped. He looked at Mother. "Read it, Robert," Mother hissed. $550,000, Father whispered. He dropped the paper on the table. $500,000. I looked at the bundle in my lap. The oilcloth smelled of the garage. The metal smelled of nothing. It was cold. It was indifferent to their shock. It was indifferent to me. It simply was. Bella ripped the emerald necklace off her neck. She threw it onto the sofa. It landed on a cushion, looking suddenly garish, like a prop from a high school play. "You knew!" Bella screamed. She turned to Grandma. Her face was blotchy, her composure shattered. "You knew! You tricked me!" "I offered you a choice," Grandma said calmly. "I put two things on the table. You chose the one that sparkled. You chose the one that would make people look at you. You chose the one that matched your eyes. It's a fake, Bella shrieked. You let me pick a fake. I let you pick what you valued, Grandma said. You valued the appearance of wealth. Jessica valued the history. She took the box because she remembered playing with it. She took the dust. She earned what was under it. This is insane, Mother said. She was trembling. Mother Elaine, this is senile dementia. You can't just give $500,000 to Jessica. She doesn't know what to do with it. She drives a Ford. She can buy a new Ford, Grandma said. Or 10 of them. It's a mistake, Father said. He was trying to regain control, stepping into his role as the patriarch. Clearly there was a misunderstanding about the nature of the assets. We need to reevaluate. We can't have one sister walking away with a fortune and the other with costume jewelry. It's not equitable. You were very concerned with equity 10 minutes ago, I said. I stood up. I gathered the oilcloth and the platinum into a ball in my hands. I held it against my chest. You said my life was small. You said I didn't need real gems. You said the emerald would be wasted on me. That was before we knew it was glass, Bella cried. I'm getting married, Jessica. I have a reputation to maintain Richard's family. If I wear glass, they'll laugh at me. They'll know. Then don't wear it, I said. Wear nothing, or wear the poodle brooch. Give it to me, Bella said. She stepped toward me, her hand out. Trade. We trade. You like the box, right? You can keep the box. Just give me the Cartier. You don't even like diamonds. You don't even go to parties. No, I said. Jessica. Mother said, her voice dropping to that dangerous, reasonable tone again. Be sensible. This is family wealth. It belongs to the estate. It needs to be insured, protected, managed. You live in a walk-up. You can't keep Cartier in a walk-up. It's irresponsible. Give it to your father. He'll put it in the safe. The safe, I asked. The safe where you kept the glass necklace for 40 years. That's different, Father said. Jessica, listen to reason. We'll sell it. We'll invest the money. We'll set up a trust. You'll get a stipend. But you can't just walk out of here with it. I looked at them. They were panic-stricken. The hierarchy of the family had been inverted in seconds. The power had shifted from the people with the titles to the person with the truth. They looked small. They looked cheap. I'm not trading, I said. And I'm not giving it to you to manage. It's $550,000, Father shouted. You can't just take it. I can, I said. Grandma gave it to me. We all saw it. We all heard it. I looked at Grandma. She raised her glass to me. Possession is 9/10 of the law, Grandma said. And she's holding it. I looked down at the platinum in my hands. I rubbed my thumb over the diamonds. The grease was still on my skin, black and sticky. It felt like war paint. I'm leaving, I said. You can't leave, Mother said. We haven't had dessert. I'm full, I said. I turned toward the door. The weight of the jewelry was substantial, pulling down on my arms. It was the weight of a house, the weight of a future, the weight of freedom. Jessica, Bella screamed. Come back here. That's mine. I'm the oldest. I'm the bride. It's mine. I didn't stop. I walked out of the sitting room, past the silver tree, past the cold hallway, and grabbed my coat. I didn't put it on. I just bundled the jewelry inside it and opened the front door. The cold wind hit me biting and clean. It smelled of snow and pine, not of stale perfume and lies. I stepped out into the storm. I didn't make it to the car. I had taken 2 steps onto the porch, the snow swirling around my ankles and the wind cutting through the thin wool of my dress when the heavy oak door slammed against the stop behind me. My father's hand clamped onto my upper arm. His grip was tight, desperate, the fingers digging into the muscle. He didn't pull me back with affection. He pulled me back like I was a ledger that was falling off a desk. Get back inside, he shouted over the wind. You are not walking off with $500,000 in a snowstorm. Are you out of your mind? He dragged me backward into the foyer. The heat of the house rushed up to meet us, stifling and dry. He kicked the door shut, sealing out the clean, cold air. The silence of the house returned, but it was brittle now. The festive atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by the sharp metallic scent of panic. I stood by the coat rack, clutching the bundle of oilcloth to my chest. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I wasn't afraid. Fear implies a possibility of loss, and I had nothing to lose that I hadn't already lost years ago. Mother came into the hallway. She had lost her magazine poise. Her face was pale, and there were red splotches on her neck, a sign of her blood pressure spiking. Bella followed, trailing the green necklace in her hand like a dead snake. "Jessica," Mother said. She forced a smile. It was a terrible, strained thing. "Let's not be dramatic. Your father is right. It's dangerous out there. Come back into the sitting room. Let's sit down. Let's have some coffee." "I don't want coffee," I said. "I want to go home." "This is your home," Mother said. She took a step closer, her hands clasped in front of her. "We are your family, and families discuss things. We don't just abscond with assets." "It's not an asset," I said. "It's a gift. Grandma gave it to me." "There was a misunderstanding," Mother said quickly. She waved her hand as if shooing away a fly. "A clear breakdown in communication. We were operating under false pretenses, Jessica. You have to see that. We thought the box was, well, junk. And Grandma, bless her, she's enjoying her little game, but she can't possibly mean for you to shoulder the burden of a Cartier set alone. It's too much responsibility for one person." "I can handle it," I said. "Can you?" Father asked. He had moved to block the door, crossing his arms. He looked like a bouncer at a club I couldn't afford to enter. "Do you have a safe? Do you have an alarm system? Do you have insurance? If you walk out that door and someone mugs you in the parking lot of your apartment complex, that money is gone. Poof, vaporized. Is that what you want? To lose the family legacy because you were too stubborn to ask for help?" "It wasn't a legacy 5 minutes ago," I said. 5 minutes ago, it was garbage intended for the garage. You told me to check it for spores." "I was joking," Mother said, her voice pitched higher. "You know my sense of humor, Jessica. I was teasing." "You weren't teasing," I said. "You were discarding." Bella stepped forward. She looked at the bundle in my arms, then down at the emerald in her hand. The green glass looked dull in the hallway light. She looked young suddenly and very small. "Jess," she said. Her voice was trembling. "Trade with me." I looked at her. "What? Trade," she repeated. She held out the emerald necklace. "I'll give you the emerald. And I'll give you the ring. My engagement ring. It's 3 carats. It's real. Richard spent 50,000 on it. Take it. Take the ring and the emerald and give me the box." "Bella," Father warned, "don't give her the ring." "Shut up, Daddy," Bella snapped. She turned back to me, her eyes wide and wet. "Please, think about it. You don't care about society stuff. You don't care about the gala. If I show up wearing a replica, Richard's mother will know. She knows jewelry. She'll spot it across the room. I'll be a laughingstock. They'll think we're broke. They'll think I'm a fraud." "You are a fraud," I said. I didn't say it with hate. I said it as a fact. "You wanted the symbol. You wanted the thing that looked big. You got it." "But it's worth nothing," Bella cried. "It's $400. I can't build a life on $400. And I can't build a life on an insult," I said. "But that's what you gave me. You gave me the insult, Bella. You and Mom and Dad. You looked at 2 boxes and you decided I deserved the trash. You decided my worth was 0. You can't rewrite that just because the price tags changed." "It's not about the price tag," Mother said, stepping between us. "It's about appropriateness. Bella is the one who needs the jewelry, Jessica. It's a tool for her future. For you, it's just money. And if it's just money, we can work that out. We'll buy the box from you. We'll pay you the appraised value, over time. An annuity." "An annuity?" I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "You want to put me on an allowance with my own money?" "It's for your own good," Father said. "You're not financial, Jessica. You're an archivist. You don't understand liquidity. You don't understand capital gains. I can manage this for you. I can roll it into the family trust. It will grow. We all benefit. I don't want to benefit with you, I said. The hallway grew very quiet. The grandfather clock by the stairs ticked loudly. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Father's face reddened. The reasonable mask was slipping. He stepped away from the door and moved toward me. He was a large man and he used his size to intimidate. He had done it my whole life. He loomed. Now you listen to me, he said, his voice dropping to a growl. I have indulged this little rebellion because it's Christmas and because your grandmother is feeling mischievous. But I am the head of this household. I am the executor of the estate. All property in this house is under my jurisdiction until it is legally transferred. You do not have a bill of sale. You do not have a deed of gift. You have a box of junk that you picked up from a table. Put it down. He reached for the bundle. I stepped back, bracing myself against the coat rack. I tightened my grip on the platinum. The metal bit into my palms through the cloth. No, I said. I said give it to me, he shouted. He lunged, grabbing the oilcloth. Robert! The voice cracked through the hallway like a whip. It came from the doorway of the sitting room. Grandma Elaine stood there. She was leaning on her cane, her knuckles white, but she stood tall. She looked furious. Take your hands off her, Grandma said. Father froze. He didn't let go of the cloth, but he stopped pulling. He looked over his shoulder. Mother, stay out of this, he said. She's stealing from the family. She is the family, Grandma said. She walked forward. The cane tapped rhythmically on the marble floor. Click, step, click, step. She stopped 3 feet from him. You are a fool, Robert. You always were. You look at the price, but you never see the value. I gave that box to Jessica. It was a verbal contract witnessed by everyone in that room. It is hers. It's worth $500,000, Father yelled. You can't just give a child $500,000 on a whim. It wasn't a whim, Grandma said. It was a test, and you all failed it, spectacularly. She looked at Bella, who was weeping silently now, clutching the fake emerald. Stop crying, Bella, Grandma said. You look ugly when you cry. You wanted the flash. You have the flash. Wear it in good health. If you carry yourself like a queen, nobody will know it's glass. But you don't have the spine for it. That's your problem, not the necklace. She turned to Mother. And you, Susan, trying to negotiate an annuity, trying to swindle your own daughter. It's pathetic. I thought I taught you better. We have to protect the estate, Mother whispered, looking at the floor. The estate is money, Grandma said. The family is blood. You forgot the difference. Grandma turned to me. Her expression softened. It wasn't warm exactly, but it was respectful. It was the look one soldier gives another after a battle. Jessica, she said, the diamonds are yours. The platinum is yours. Do what you want with them. Sell them. Wear them. Throw them in the Long Island Sound. But do not give them to these people. Do you understand? I understand, I said. Father let go of the cloth. He stepped back defeated. He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly old. He looked at the Cartier set peeking out from the oily rag, and I saw the greed fade into a dull, aching regret. He knew he had lost. He hadn't just lost the money. He had lost the leverage. Fine, Father said. He turned away, unable to look at me. Fine. Take it. Go. I intend to, I said. But don't expect us to help you, Mother said. She was trembling, wrapping her arms around herself as if she were cold. When the tax man comes, when the insurance bills come, don't come crying to us. You're on your own, Jessica. You've made that very clear. I've been on my own for a long time, I said. You just stopped paying for the privilege of ignoring me. I adjusted the bundle in my arms. I looked at the oilcloth. It was dirty, staining the front of my gray wool dress. I didn't care. Bella, I said. My sister looked up. Her mascara was running. The box, I said. The wooden one. You can have it. For the attic. If you want. I don't want the stupid box, she spat. I hate it. Suit yourself, I said. I looked at Grandma one last time. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just don't become them." I turned back to the door. I reached out and turned the heavy brass knob. The latch clicked. It was a heavy sound, final and absolute. I pulled the door open. The wind had picked up. The snow was coming down in sheets now, erasing the world, covering the driveway, the manicured hedges, and the luxury cars in a blanket of uniform white. It was cold, brutally cold, but it felt clean. It felt like the truth. I stepped out onto the porch. The door didn't slam behind me this time. I heard it click shut, softly closed by a human hand. I didn't look back to see who had done it. I walked down the steps. The snow crunched under my boots. My car was waiting at the end of the line, covered in a fresh inch of powder. I walked past the Mercedes. I walked past the Range Rover. I walked past the Porsche. They were just shapes in the snow now, indistinguishable from boulders or snowbanks. I reached my Ford. I brushed the snow off the handle. My hands were shaking not from the cold, but from the adrenaline leaving my system. I opened the door and tossed the bundle onto the passenger seat. The platinum clinked against the worn upholstery. It looked ridiculous there, $500,000 of French Art Deco jewelry sitting on a seat stained with coffee and old receipts. I got in. I slammed the door, shutting out the wind. I sat in the silence for a moment, staring at the dark house. The lights were still on. They were still in there, drinking their brandy, holding their glass emerald, trapped in the warmth they had bought with their souls. I put the key in the ignition. The engine turned over, struggling for a second in the cold, then catching with a roar. I turned on the headlights. The beams cut through the falling snow, illuminating the path ahead. It was white and empty and open. I put the car in gear. I didn't drive fast. I drove steady. I had a long way to go and I was carrying a heavy load. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the weight of it. I felt light. I felt like I was finally truly moving. The tires crunched over the packed snow of the long driveway, a sound like crushing sugar. I drove slowly. The Ford wasn't built for speed, and the storm had erased the edges of the world. The headlights cut two yellow cones into the swirling white darkness, catching only the falling flakes and the skeletal branches of the oaks that lined the road. I reached the stone pillars that marked the end of my parents' property. I stopped the car. I didn't have to. There was no gate, no guard, only the open road beyond. But I stopped. I put the transmission in neutral and engaged the handbrake. The engine idled, a rough, steady vibration that traveled up through the seat and into my spine. I looked in the rearview mirror. The house was still visible through the trees, a glowing fortress on the hill. Every window was blazing with light. It looked festive. It looked perfect. From this distance, you couldn't see the cracks in the veneer. You couldn't hear the shouting. You couldn't see the cheap glass around my sister's neck or the panic in my father's eyes. It was just a picture on a Christmas card, serene and untouchable. I looked at the library window, the one on the ground floor where the sitting room was. A shadow moved against the curtains. It was small and sharp. Grandma Elaine. I remembered the moment before I opened the front door, a detail that had been lost in the adrenaline of the exit, but now surfaced with crystal clarity. Just before I grabbed the knob as Father was stepping back, Grandma had reached out. She hadn't hugged me. We weren't huggers. She had placed her hand on my shoulder. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her fingers digging into the wool of my coat. She had squeezed once hard. A transfer of command. It was the way a mechanic checks a belt or a rider checks a cinch. It was a confirmation of structural integrity. Don't become them. I touched my shoulder now, feeling the phantom pressure of her hand. She was still back there inside the fortress, drinking her scotch and watching the fire. She would finish her drink. She would eat the hazelnut torte. She would watch them spin their narratives and justify their greed, and she would say nothing. She had fired her shot. The rest was just noise. I shifted the car back into drive. The tires spun for a fraction of a second, seeking purchase on the ice, and then caught. I pulled out onto the county road. The isolation was immediate. The road was empty. Everyone else was at home safe behind locked doors, surrounded by wrapping paper and warmth. I was the only thing moving in the landscape. The heater fan whirred, finally kicking into high gear, blowing hot, dry air against my frozen feet. The smell of the car-old coffee dust and gasoline was the sweetest thing I had ever smelled. It was the scent of ownership. I glanced at the passenger seat. The bundle of oilcloth sat there dark and ugly against the gray fabric. It slid slightly as I took a curve. I reached out and touched it. The metal was warming up. $550,000. The number didn't feel like money. It didn't feel like a bank balance. It felt like time. That was what the platinum represented. It wasn't a yacht or a luxury car or a ticket to the gala. It was 20 years of mortgage payments. It was the ability to quit a job if I hated it. It was the freedom to say no. I thought about Bella. She was probably still crying, or maybe Mother had calmed her down by now, feeding her lies about how the emerald was better suited for her complexion. They would rewrite the night before morning came. By tomorrow, the story would be that they had let me take the old box out of charity. They would sanitize the defeat until it looked like benevolence. They would wear the glass and pretend it was stone. Let them. I drove past the turnoff for the highway and kept on the back roads. I wanted the slowness. I wanted to feel every mile that I put between myself and that house. The road wound through the woods, dark and silent. I imagined the future. It wasn't a grand cinematic vision. I saw myself walking into the bank in New Haven on Tuesday morning. I saw the safety deposit box, a long, narrow drawer of gray metal. I would put the Cartier set inside. I wouldn't sell it immediately. I didn't need to. I would just let it sit there in the dark, real and heavy and mine. I would go back to the archives. I would handle the old paper and the vinegar-scented letters. I would drive my Ford. I would wear my gray wool dresses. But I would know. That was the difference I realized. The difference between me and them. They needed the world to see their value. They needed the appraisal, the audience, the flash. My value was in the box on the seat. It was hidden. It was quiet. It required no applause. I thought about the King Lear test Grandma had run. It wasn't about love. It was about perception. Bella saw the surface. I saw the weight. It was a lesson in American stoicism that Hemingway himself would have appreciated. The real things are never the shiny things. The real things are the ones that endure the attic. The real things are the ones that are covered in grease and dirt and look like nothing until you put in the work to clean them. The snow began to lighten as I crossed the town line. The clouds were breaking up, shifting in the high wind. I could see the moon, a pale, cold disk behind the veil of white. I turned on the radio. It was a local station playing a jazz standard, something slow and melancholic. The trumpet cut through the hum of the engine. I hummed along, a low sound in my throat. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had been left on the porch. Now there was only a clean, cold clarity. I had gone into the lion's den, and I had walked out with the meat. I patted the bundle on the seat one last time. "Merry Christmas," I said to the empty car. I pressed the accelerator. The old Ford surged forward, finding its footing on the slick asphalt. The taillights glowed bright red in the rearview mirror. Two burning eyes fading into the white winter night, leaving the estate, the emeralds, and the lies far behind in the darkness. I drove toward the city, toward the small apartment, toward the silence, and toward a life that was finally completely my own. The engine's hum fades as the screen darkens, leaving only the quiet echo of the snowy Connecticut road. Jessica's journey reminds us that true value is rarely found on the surface. If you enjoyed this narrative of resilience and quiet justice, please consider subscribing and liking the video. We want to hear your perspective on the grandmother's test, and we read every single comment of your thoughts. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.